I had forgotten. So for the recording, really quick, progressives are divided over a lot of issues. Some support things, some are against things. That is the way it goes. But summarize this key point. Do not write it word per word, right? Progressives are divided over almost every issue that they are fighting for. There are multiple sides of every issue in the progressive movement. About 20 seconds before we move forward.
So, how you doing? Is like everything good at home, sir? Everything good at work?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm doing just fine. Enjoying that house life.
Uh, how does it feel to be a homeowner?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Not gonna lie. Got my
You
dog there.
feel like you're on a pedestal or something? You feel like
No,
you're just walking
not a
around?
pedestal. I just feel like I don't know. It feels weird. It's like I don't know, there's certain stuff you just don't have to worry about.
You're part of the 1% in the Gilded Age time.
No way. I wish. No way. I'm more of like that rising middle class. You know what I'm talking about? Like the settlement house people. I'm like that. Definitely like that. All right, guys. So who were progressives? Well, thing to note, we're going to talk about 6 main goals or beliefs they have. For this first one, be careful because these 3 things are things they are trying to stop or control. They're trying to stop or control the power of big business. They're trying to stop or control the uncertainties in the economy, and they are trying to stop increased violent conflicts between labor groups and their employers. So those are things they're trying to stop or control. Other things they want to do is break away the control of political machines on urban voting. Who remembers what a political machine is? Somebody put it in the chat if you remember. If you don't remember, put don't know. Take on Jim Crow segregation in the South and end the lack of women's suffrage as well as alcohol problems. So in the chat, somebody remind me, what were political machines? Do you remember? Yes or no? If you do, tell me what one of them was. What do they do? We talked about it last week. What are political machines? And I'll give you about a minute and a half on the slide afterwards. What are political machines? What do we got? And if you don't remember, don't remember. They controlled voting, job bosses, yep, people who secured votes. So they secured votes and controlled it, right? They like manipulated communities. Good job, guys. So good job. About a minute and a half on this slide. Actually, about a minute. Listen to that. Don't remember. So they were like corrupted, right? And they used their corruption and their abilities, their power to steal votes. They would basically manipulate communities, give them things that they thought they wanted or that they needed, and then use those communities to vote for people that they wanted. And you have these guys that are called bosses, right, that were corrupt, tended to steal, and they had a lot of political power. They had a lot of political sway. What they said could go. And there are reasons why they were able to thrive in the Gilded Era, but progressives want to get rid of them. They want to end the political machine corruption that is around in the United States. We'll go another 20 seconds, and then we will move forward. All right, guys, moving forward. So who were the progressives? Church leaders, feminists, African Americans. Those are part of this group and more. All of these groups agreed that on some level, society was deteriorating, that it was getting worse, and that the only way it could be fixed was through direct and intense government effort or involvement. So basically, yes, all of the progressives have arguments. They all don't necessarily agree on things, but all progressives agree on one thing, and that is society is deteriorating and the government needs to fix it. So how can you summarize that? Every single progressive group agrees that society is getting worse, and it's going to take government involvement, direct and intense government involvement to fix it. So that is the most important part on this slide, right? I'll give you a quick minute and a half. If you need more time, let me know. I don't know what I'm doing with my hands there. I don't know why they're moving like this. I'm doing the Trump thing. Progressives. About 15, actually 20 seconds. 20 seconds. All right, let's go ahead and move forward. So key point 2, again, you don't need everything word per word on this key point, but there are a group of progressive era journalists that attacked what they saw as political corruption, social injustice, and economic inequality. Many reformers were from the middle and upper classes, including lots of women, who also affected social changes in cities among immigrant populations. That was the settlement house movement. Don't forget that. So these progressive era journalists that we're going to talk about, though, they wanted to fight corruption. They wanted to fight what they saw as a lack of social justice, and they wanted to help bring about economic equality. They were looking for the truth, and they were willing to dig through and find it. What is this the opposite of? What's that other type of journalist that does the opposite of this, where they write the sensational stories to get you to buy newspapers?
Yellow journalism.
Yes, yellow journalism, right? These guys are like the opposite of yellow journalists, all right? And we're going to talk about who they were and what their groups were in a second. So these are like the opposite of yellow journalists. About another 30 seconds or so. Getting ready to move forward. So these journalists were called muckraker journalists. And they're called that because, and they were actually called this by Teddy Roosevelt, but they're called that because they were designed, or they were, how would you say it? Like, people saw them as raking past all of the muck, all the dirt, grime, and that dirt, grime, muck was the lies, the corruption. They would rake through it and find the truth. All right. And what these muckrakers did was they exposed a lot of the injustice, a lot of the poor conditions, and a lot of the unsanitary things that were happening during the Gilded Age. These three works that you have to know: The Jungle by Upton Sinclair exposed unsanitary and and quite frankly, gross, disgusting meatpacking industry conditions. So they had vivid and gross images of thumbs, human thumbs, dropping into ground meat vats and being left in there. A factory full of rats. And this is a meat packing factory. This is like where you'd go buy your meat for like groceries. Full of rats, human parts found in the meat vats, all sorts of gross, horrible things that were actually happening in these factories during the Gilded Age. Ida Tarbell published an expose on Standard Oil and their unfair working conditions and the unfair way they went about creating the monopoly of buying up the businesses and things like that. Jacob Riis exposés on poor conditions in New York tenements. Basically, a lot of the reasons we know that the New York tenement situation and system was horrible and unclean and unsanitary and unsafe was because of the works of these people. So you basically just summarize, right? These three works are major examples of muckraker journalism taking hold. It's like the opposite of yellow journalism, right? If yellow journalism is exaggerating and making stuff up and getting you to buy a newspaper, this stuff is exposing the truth, showing you what's actually happening. Why is this so important? Why do you need muckraker journalism in the progressive era? What does it allow to happen? In the chat, or come off mute and tell me, why is this so important? Why do you think it's so important, I should say? What's important about it? What does it lead to? Or what could it lead to? It allows change in the workforce. I'll give you that. What else? And why? Why is there change happening? What gets to happen now? So it does allow for change in the workforce, but again, like why? Stop the spread of false stories. Sure. What else? And don't get me wrong, there's still going to be false stories. Like, they're not going to be able to stop that stuff. But why is it so important that these guys are telling the truth? What is it going to allow to happen? What is it going to lead to happening? So like, we have allowed for change. That's good. But like, why, how, what else? What's going to happen? Like, what do you need in order for people to enact change? What needs to be happening? What do people need to do? Think about it and just give your best shot. You can send this privately in the chat. You can speak it out. You can say it publicly. Doesn't matter. But what do you think? Why is it possible? What will they allow to happen? Can you have a protest if you don't know what's going on? Exactly, Jerry, you nailed it. So yes, people are going to protest. There's going to be change. People are going to demand change. But you only get those demands for change. You only get those people getting up to go protest if they know what's happening. There's no Twitter. There's no way to communicate these things other than a journalist willing to get in there and do that work. These journalists, these muckraker journalists, are almost like detectives. They're digging up the truth, they're finding the truth, and then they're publishing it to people. You'll know Instagram. Yeah, there's no Instagram either. There's no any of that, right? There's no communication in that sense. It takes somebody willing to put themselves in danger, because to an extent it's dangerous doing what they're doing, to expose that stuff. So it's really important. I'll give you another minute because I talked for the whole time to get this info down, and then we will move forward.
Sir, would they ever go and do the jobs themselves to find out how the work conditions are?
So some did, but the way I understand it is they were a lot of times like doing the, how would you say, kind of like they were doing the detective thing. They'd go find somebody like, hey, come over here. Like, let me buy you a cup of coffee. And then they'd talk to them. So like they would talk to the workers. they would talk to the people who kept the books, right? They would talk to all the people and they would see these things. And sometimes they would walk in and see this stuff, but it wasn't necessarily because they were pretending to work there. In some instances, I guarantee you it did happen, right? Because these three are just specific examples, but this stuff happened in everything you can think of, right? There was these groups of journalists out there willing to do that work. So I would say yes, but not these three individuals specifically. But yeah, for sure. It's all about uncovering the truth.
That's crazy.
It's what happens though. It's what happens when it's, you know. All right, let's move forward. So Jim Crow and segregation, all of this info, you don't need it all. All you need to know is that segregation is still going on in the United States. They are still publicly lynching African Americans, and two groups were founded to try to help this out. The Niagara Movement, which was founded by W.B. Du Bois, who planned a lot of protests and petitions to the government. Then you have the NAACP, who aimed to abolish segregation and expand education for children, specifically African Americans. Racial injustice, however, during this era was mainly fought on their own, meaning that only African American progressives during this time, for the most part, I don't mean to speak in ultimatums, for the most part, it was only African American and progressives who fought on the race card. Most other progressives either ignored it or chose or supported it. So for the most part, African Americans are on their own in these struggles early on. So that's really all you need there. Point out the two groups fighting segregation and point out that for most of this, African Americans are on their own. I'll give you about a minute and a half for that.
The first and last point?
Pretty much, but again, not the whole first point, really just the point about, because a lot of the Plessy versus Ferguson, all that stuff, should already know it. If you don't know it, you can, but you should already know it. A little bit more time on this slide, and then we'll move on. All right, let's move forward. So key point 3. Again, summarize this as best you can. On a national level, progressives sought federal legislation that would regulate the economy and expand democracy to regular people. Progressive amendments to the Constitution were dealing with issues like prohibition and women's suffrage. About another 45 seconds on here, and then we'll move forward. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move forward now on to the next point. We're going to start talking about politics in the era. So, secret ballots. What's important to note here, first of all, is that before the progressive era, all throughout the Gilded Age and before, there was no secret ballot. Voting was done in plain sight. Everybody knew who you voted for. And it shows that this is how political machines maintain their power, because they would threaten you to do something and they say, I know if you're going to do it right. That's how they're able to threaten and control votes. So progressives wanted a secret ballot in order to weaken these political machines, right? You can't threaten somebody to vote one way if you don't know how they're going to vote, and there's no way for you to know. So the secret ballot is introduced to cut off power to political machines. So we'll give you a quick minute and a half to summarize. That's a really brief point, but it is a really important one. About 20 seconds. All right, let's move forward. So now we're going to talk about the three amendments that happened. Again, you don't need everything here word for word. You need the name of the amendment and what it did. 17th Amendment I'm sorry, wow, lost my train of thought there first. The 17th Amendment allows direct voting of senators to go to the people. So before the 17th Amendment was passed, state legislators chose the senators that were elected, a lot like how it was for the president, only the people didn't get a say at all, right? There wasn't like a popular vote and an electoral college vote. Prior to this, state legislators chose senators. But with the 17th Amendment in 1913, now senators are chosen by the people directly. The 18th Amendment established prohibition. All right. So that basically means there's no more drinking or selling of alcohol. People thought it would fix society's problems. It didn't. We'll talk more about prohibition later, though. And then the 19th Amendment, which ratified and allowed women their right to vote. So those are all really important, and they all happened during this era. I'll give you a quick minute and a half to get them down. Oh, sorry. All right, let's move forward. So again, 3 things to define and nothing else. Try not to write everything word per word. You have 3 major movements that will happen during this era. More time. Sorry, let me go back. Give me another a little less than a minute or so to get those in. Sorry about that. All right, we're going to go to move forward. So again, 3 terms that you got to know for this. The initiative, which allows voters to require a legislator to reconsider a bill. If a legislator ignores a bill or declines a bill, they say, hey, look at it one more time. The referendum, voters could vote on bills themselves, on laws on their own. Basically, the idea that a voter could choose and vote in a law. Things like prohibition will go to referendums. So will local laws in a lot of cases, local and state laws, like the state can vote to legalize certain things and all of that good stuff. And then the recall, which is a way to remove a corrupt politician. And then here is the most important part, I guess you should say. So you get the 3 terms. And then the biggest part in the Gilded Age, the thing that the one like sentence explanation is basically like this, or not in the Gilded Age, Progressive Age. During the Gilded Age, big business was supported, or the government supported big business and not the people. The people were ignored and big business was supported. In the Progressive era, government switches that. They start to support the people and start to ignore or at least deal with big business on their own. So the people kind of maintain their power. So those are the 2 things you need to know. I'll give you about 2 minutes for that, and then we will move forward. About 30 more seconds. Let me know if you need more time than that. Otherwise, we're going to move forward. All right, let's go to move forward. So really quick, really brief. Frederick Taylor designed the principles of scientific management. And basically what it means is they applied things like timing and efficiency to factory work, and it made factory work more efficient, profitable, and all that good stuff. Some people think that the scientific approach should be applied to government. That's it. Really brief, really quick.
Sir, all the Fredericks are coming up with scientific ideas.
Yeah, pretty much. All the Fredericks. Yeah, his whole thing is just like, hey, if you timed how people worked and things, it would make work go better, and it does. And so some people say like, hey, well, can you do that with the government? Some people are saying that, not many, but some. It's not a whole lot there. Just really brief. Give you another quick, like 45 seconds on it. It's not much. For the next couple of slides, I believe. Let me double check. Yeah, so ignore key point 4. Don't even write it. Don't worry about it. It's a mess up on my part. We're gonna start talking about Teddy Roosevelt. There's about 2 slides of Teddy Roosevelt. They are swamped with information. I recommend using the slides on Google Classroom and referencing them and kind of filling in the info a little bit later. So that way you're not like stuck trying to write every single little word. I'm going to do my best to kind of elaborate and explain, but since Teddy's my favorite, I tend to get distracted. So I'm just warning you on the front end, but I'm going to do my best to kind of summarize what you need to know about the things that Teddy Roosevelt did, the contributions he made, because he made a lot of them. So let's move forward and let's get into that. Again, we're going to skip key point 4. We're not even going to talk about it. So Teddy Roosevelt, he's one of the most prominent and successful progressive presidents of his time. President McKinley before him had been assassinated and he took over. And afterwards, when he runs for president, he wins it, no problem. His platform was very popular and it was known as something called the Square Deal. Does anybody know what a square deal is? Really quick, yes or no? You know what a square deal is? When I say, hey, that was a square deal, you know what I'm talking about? If you don't, tell me, because this is the term of the time. So yes or no? No. Okay. I've heard of it. Okay. So a square deal is basically a fair deal. So you need to know square deal. Straightforward. Yeah, it's straightforward. It's fair. Everything's on the table. So square deal equals fair deal. But again, recognize it as square deal. Square deal equals fair deal. So again, during the Gilded Age, government sides with big business on everything. Well, what Roosevelt does and what he runs on and what's different from everybody, what makes him different from everybody else, is he doesn't pick a side. He does not side with big business, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to just side with labor. What he does, and he's very famous for doing this, is he has both groups come over, he listens to them, and instead of choosing a side, he comes up and he makes them come up with a fair deal for everybody. Right? So that's why it's called the square deal. No fine print, it's fair. So Roosevelt was very, very famous for the square deal. Again, make it fair. His whole thing is make it fair. Business should be fair, right? Yes, it's business. Yes, it's capitalism. Yes, it's free enterprise, but it's still got to be fair. Yeah, kind of like a compromise, right? If labor says we can't work 30 hours a day, you know what I mean? Then and the employer say, yeah, but you got to work something. Then, he meets in the middle. Let's meet for 8, right? Let's have a regular work day, 40-hour a week instead of a 80-hour week, right? Like meet in the middle. That's exactly what he's doing. He's making it fair for everybody, helping them compromise. And it's unlike anybody before him. You can't work 30 hours in a day. That is very fair. Thank you for pointing that out. You cannot work 30 hours in a day. It is actually impossible unless some of you have like some sort of time. No, even with time travel, it doesn't work that way. Yep, fair enough. I've been I've been beaten. Wow, imagine saying that the day was 30 hours long in the middle of class. I never claimed to be a math teacher, guys.
Have you had a cup of coffee?
I know. Hold on. Let me get another sip.
This guy.
I never claimed to be a math teacher, even though I don't think 24 hours in a day is technically a math problem, but it is for Cavazos. But so yes, square deal, fair for everybody. That was his whole argument. That's his whole thing. I'll leave this up for about another minute. Let me know if you need more time than that. All right, let's move forward in about 20 seconds. So he promotes a fair deal, right? Square deal. That's what Teddy's all about. And when we move forward, he had a bunch of other things he was very prominent for. So trust busting. This might be one of the most important things that Teddy does in his presidency. It's called trust busting. And what he did is he, using the Sherman Antitrust Act, which is what it was called, he broke up monopolies within big business. He did not, he wasn't indiscriminate though. So he didn't break up every monopoly or every trust. He distinguished between a good trust and a bad trust. Basically, good monopolies, bad monopolies. Did you make your money and profit and grow your business honestly, or did you do it dishonestly? Did you cheat to get your way? The ones that were bad trusts, he found them and he broke them up. He split them up. Standard Oil, I believe Carnegie Steel, JP Morgan, all of these businesses that bought out their competitors when they were still small and didn't let other businesses try to get involved, he broke them up. In like nowadays, for example, I can think of different brands and companies that have monopolies on things that did it fairly. Can you guys think of any? JP Morgan. Like, what are some examples of businesses that may have, that might have a monopoly, at least in our minds, right? That really don't, and that did all of it fairly. Can you think of anything? While you're thinking, I'll give you one example. You ever gone to somebody's house or have somebody come over to your house and, you know, you ask them like, hey, what do you want to drink? Or like, hey, you want a Coke to drink? Sure. And like, yeah, what type? Then you say, oh, I don't know, Sprite or something, right? Coke is like synonymous with what soda is, right? Like, hey, you want a Coke? And you're not necessarily talking about Coca-Cola, you're talking about soda. Even though Coca-Cola is a brand, they kind of have a monopoly on that thing, but not really, right? Because there's also H-E-B soda. There's also other different little soda brands in between, Pepsi, all those other things. But they're synonymous with it. Hey, my nose is running. Let me grab a Kleenex, right? That's a brand that kind of monopolizes the Kleenex industry, but not really. The tissue industry, but not really. But sort of, but not really. Does that make sense? Those are like good trusts. Those are brands that monopolized their business ventures fairly. When competitors come up, they're allowed to compete. It just tends to not matter sometimes. Does that make sense to you guys? Yes or no? Somebody let me know. And when I say somebody, I mean everybody. Because that is the difference between a good trust and a bad trust. And what Teddy does is he distinguishes that. Hey, Standard Oil, you just bought out all your competitors. Okay, I'm going to split you up. You need to have competitors. It's not fair for the consumer. He also protected consumers with food. He allowed the Pure Food and Drug Administration Act and the Consumer Protection Act, which made food grade safety and meat inspection law. One is just for meat cleanliness and the other is for all food grade stuff. it made it against the law to have, you know, unsanitary, unsafe, and unclean food processing. No more human parts found in ground beef. No more rats filled in the factories. Like, it was more clean. He made it clean. He made them clean up their act literally. And then he's responsible for conservation. Conservation, you know, may or may not be familiar with it, but the United States is a very unique country in the sense that they have these vast ranges of unused natural landscape. Not a lot of countries have that. Most countries have been developed through, right? Not a lot of countries have literally untouched landscape. I mean literally. It's like, it's true. But the United States does, and they do this through national parks, national forests, and state parks and state forests, and so on and so forth. Part of why this happens is because Roosevelt realizes that the natural landscape is disappearing, and it's something he was very fond of when he was growing up, when he was a young man, and then as president. And it's something that he realized if he didn't do anything to stop, there would be nothing to maintain it. So during his presidency, he reserves 150 million acres of untouched, unspoiled land to be conserved and preserved. And that's where national parks come from. He's very much responsible for it. He's the one that does it. It happened since you've got your Aldo Leopolds of the world that keep fighting for it and keep spreading it. But things like Big Bend, the Grand Canyon, all of these things that look like they did back in 1491 are only like that because of Roosevelt's actions to start it, right? And now there's a whole process for doing it today. So that is really important as well. I'll give you a quick 2 minutes on this slide. Has he done anything bad? He's not perfect. I shouldn't. I know I'm portraying him as like really awesome, but it's because he kind of was. He's not perfect. Nobody is. The arguments they'll make against him is like, oh, well, he's kind of a warmonger, but he doesn't really get us in any wars. It's weird, right? Like he's considered a warmonger because when he was younger, he liked to fight in wars, but he doesn't get us in one while he's president. The reason it's so hard to trash Teddy Roosevelt is because he's not one of these sympathizers. I will say, if you want to trash him for anything, and it's the one thing you might be able to say on him, he's not pro-segregation, but he's one of those guys that kind of ignores it. Does that make sense? So he's not a like I would not consider him. He's not a racist by any means for the time, right? Which for the time would be normal. But he doesn't do anything to stop it. And that's not necessarily giving him his fair shake, right? Because there's not much you can do at the time as a president against the Supreme Court, right? But that's the one thing I would say. He doesn't have a lot of bad moments, especially as a president. So I would be careful with listing them because people are going to be like, what? That didn't happen. You know what I mean? Because it's not really what you know him for. He's remembered very fondly. He's one of these Northern progressive Republican presidents that did a lot of really positive things for the regular people. Yeah, it makes sense, right? Because the difference. So the person who I would compare him to is like Jackson. Like, you know how Jackson was the champion of the common man and like everybody loved him during the time. But his time and what he was, right, was a Southern Democrat, like slaveholder guy. Right. So he's loved by all the Southern like slaveholder guys of the time. So you can look back on Jackson and be like, oh, well, what he was doing was bad, but people at the time loved him. The thing with Roosevelt, with Teddy, what's different about him is that he's further up enough that he's not a fan of racism, right? But he's doing stuff to help everybody. And he's not a racist while he's doing it. He doesn't have any of those ticks against him that other former presidents would. He's recent enough, right? He's in the 1900s. This is the progressive era. That a lot of the stuff he's fighting for is stuff that we still very much want. We want our food to be clean and safe to eat. We want conservation of national parks. We want a fair deal, right? We want a square deal. We want there to not be monopolies in business. So yeah, it's hard to find things that are negative about him. It really is. And they exist, but is there any president? Depends who you ask, right? I would say there hasn't been one as good as him since he is a president. Yeah. Kind of puts. Yeah. So I would say, and I'm a little biased because he's my favorite. it's hard to find a president like him. I genuinely think that if Lincoln had gotten to serve in peacetime, post Civil War, he would have been a really good comparison. Does that make sense? Like, I genuinely think they're fairly comparable to one another. But since Lincoln only served during war, and thank God he did, right? He's the reason the Union wins the Civil War. And since Lincoln never got to see peacetime, we never really know like what he would have done with Reconstruction and all that stuff. But Lincoln is the type of reformer that I think a lot of people consider Teddy to be. The difference is Lincoln had to fight a war and Teddy didn't. And when Teddy sees all these problems, he fixes them. In fact, Teddy in a few years is going to break an election because he's going to run for a third term and do it just to get everybody riled up. So we'll talk about that later. But Teddy's very popular. He's very popular in his time. He's very popular now. To give you an example, like when all the Teddy's a fixer, he is though. And when a lot of AP teachers, like when we all get together and talk about presidents, like we all try to talk about how long are we going to spend talking about Teddy, because everybody wants to give him his own day, but we can't. But he's awesome. You should I always recommend read up on Teddy Roosevelt. He's the best. He's one of my favorite presidents ever. Here are some of my hilarious Teddy Roosevelt memes. I've had these for a while. These are some of my favorites. I especially like the Standard Oil one. But yeah. Let me get into Google Classroom because as of right now, you guys still cannot see the exit ticket, but I'll fix that. Okay, so 13 haven't done any again on people. So really simple. Explain Teddy Roosevelt's contributions to your legacy. Explain Teddy Roosevelt's contributions to the progressive movement. Yep, straight up. Identify and then explain in ways the progressive movement led to prohibition, and then identify and explain ways the progressive movement changed society. So those are the three things you got to do. Be specific, make sure you cover it. Yeah, my blue eyes, but it's Teddy Roosevelt. I was gonna buy the Giants. I kind of am. I was gonna buy, like, you know how Schaefer has the big Bob Ross. I was gonna buy one of Teddy, and then I was like, no, that's me being ridiculous. I better stop.
Sad.
I know. I was like, no, I'm not gonna do that. I almost did though. I'm a little bit ashamed to admit of how close I was to buying one.
You gotta let your students know so that your students can buy it for you.
No, I'm not gonna do that. But yeah, I was about to do it, and then I was like, no, I can't be the guy with the Teddy Roosevelt thing in his classroom. People are gonna talk.
I think Mr. Nunez would be kind of jealous.
I think he would be though, right? If I had a Teddy thing, I think you're right. He would be jealous. Nunez is probably, Nunez is a Teddy fan too.
Yeah, he has that little statue thing in his.
Oh, that's right. He's got a bust, right, of Teddy. Yeah, all I have is this like quote that a student made me.
Nice.
That's what this is, a Teddy quote. But yeah, I totally almost bought the giant cardboard cutout of him. Kind of a fanboy. Teacher appreciation gift, yeah. Anything Teddy, guys. I'm always a fan. I'm sorry, I'm adding everybody into the classrooms on Google Classroom so you guys can see the exit tickets. So give me a second.
that spectacle thing.
His glasses?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's two. It's not one. It's two. But they're held on like a little chain.
That's cool. Man's a big pimp.
Oh yeah, he's a Roosevelt, guys. They're the closest you can get to like nobles in the United States. They're a really wealthy family. Yeah, he grew up a very sickly child. Like he was everybody thought he was gonna die when he was a young kid, which is part of why he grows up very, like, the second he grows out of that stuff and is old enough and strong enough to kind of go out on his own, he's very like action oriented. He likes to fight, he likes to box, he likes to fight wars. All of that's because as a child he idolized that stuff and couldn't do it. Like he couldn't go out and play with the other kids because they were like, oh no, he's gonna die. And as he got older, that's why he tried to do us. That's why he hunted. That's why he, did all that stuff. He's a really interesting read. He really is. And I apologize for the delay. I'm trying to make sure that everybody is on there. If you cannot find the exit ticket, let me know. It probably means I accidentally skipped your name when I was clicking it, but it should be uploaded right now. So it should be up there on Google Classroom. Let me know if it isn't. Let me know if you can't see it. But it should have just made it up there. There it is. And there is about 4 minutes left in class and 7 minutes till lunch, guys. So once you complete your exit ticket, you are good to go.
What's your favorite thing Teddy Roosevelt did, sir?
I have to be, it has to just be one, huh?
Fine, I'll give you two.
I'll give you two. I would say conservation. Big fan of that. And then the second one would be that he practiced what he preached in the sense that he was like, hey, let's go to war with Spain. And then the second we did it, he's like, okay, I resigned from my desk job. I'm going to go start a cavalry unit and fight a war with Spain. And then he went and fought a war with Spain. The Rough Riders, that was his cavalry division that he created. So those are my two favorite things. I appreciate that he was very pro-war and he wasn't afraid to fight in a war, which a lot of pro-war people tend to not fight in them also, unless it is like a general person. So that's something I appreciate about him. And then conservation. It's how we're able to enjoy like fishing and hunting, all that stuff today in 2021. It's because of that stuff that he did, that first step. He was not a wimp. He's far from a wimp. In fact, let me see if I can find it. I'll show you guys really quick before we go. There's a picture of him when he was in college boxing, and he's like super jacked. He's like 1900s jacked. It's kind of crazy. So I'm like, I don't want to oversell it because it is very much 1900s jacked, but that's Teddy Roosevelt in college, and that's him as president. Far from a wimp. That was just him, like the boxing team.
You can't see it.
Can't see it? Oh, I'm not sharing my screen. What am I doing? There it is. So that's President Teddy Roosevelt, and that's boxing Teddy Roosevelt from back in the day. I believe that's college boxing team or something like that.
What happened to his beard?
What happened to his beard? He shaved it.
Oh, man was looking like a caveman.
Oh, yeah. He kind of was. There's another, like, let me see. Where's the young Teddy Roosevelt? There's another one where he's like he's wearing like the deer skin and stuff. I don't think I'm going to find it. Before we go, let me see. I just saw it. There it is. This one, that's also Teddy Roosevelt. This, I think that's a Spencer. No, it's a Winchester carbine. Never mind. But yeah, so. Yep, Teddy, tough guy. That's him. Yeah, those are both pictures of Teddy Roosevelt. Again, that's the fun part about progressive era and all that stuff. We get to see pictures of people. Yeah, the boxing one was him, and then that one too was him with all the deer skin stuff. Because again, he was one of those that like idolized all of those frontier stories. That's why he wanted to do it. That's why when he found out there was no frontier anymore, he was like so devastated that he created national parks. But all right, guys, that is it for me. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great lunch. I will see you all Monday. Have a good weekend, guys.
Good weekend.
See you, Gio. See you,
Talk to
Chip.
you
Have a good
later.
one.